is a crisis. That's the view of Black Lives Matter protesters who brought traffic to a standstill outside Heathrow Airport and caused chaos for thousands of travellers. There were other protests across the country to mark the anniversary of the death of Mark Duggan, shot by police in August 2011, sparking nationwide riots. But is it really a crisis, or simply the adoption of a slogan and a campaign from the United States that has little relevance here? Let's talk to the journalist Reni Eddo-Lodge, also joining us from central London, Tom Slater, deputy editor of Spike magazine. Thank you both for joining us. Reni, to you first. What is the purpose of the Black Lives Matter campaign being transplanted across the Atlantic to the United Kingdom?
Well, I'm not sure it's been transplanted. I think the activists are using the term, but this activism has been going on in the UK for a very, very long time. People have some real concerns about deaths in police custody, most of which aren't really investigated. The vast majority of people who are dying in police custody are black. And people want some accountability and some transparency there. You know, the police are supposed to protect us. And so it's very alarming when people are dying at the hands of the police.
Reni, if it's not connected to Black Lives Matter, why on earth have they taken the name then?
I'm not saying that it's not connected. I'm saying that they're using the name, but this is a new name in Britain for some activism that's been going on for decades at this point.
Tom, people, when they hear Black Lives Matter, are immediately going to think of the campaign that's taking place in the United States, aren't they? So, in your mind, what's the utility of stopping people going on holiday at Heathrow and Birmingham?
Well, I think that's entirely the point. I think it just goes to show that really this isn't really about what it claims to be. I mean, first and foremost, Britain is not a racist country. Racism is not endemic throughout society, even throughout our institutions. There are particular things that, of course, we need to address. But unfurling a ban is saying that this is a crisis and implying that there is some similarity in the US where there is real lingering problems with police brutality, I think is actually borderline insulting. But I think you've got to look at what's really driving this. If it's not really people's lived experiences, what's going on in society. And I think it's this tendency on behalf of progressives, kind of professional activists effectively, to basically foist victim status on behalf of particular groups. And I think that ultimately that's really quite damaging. I mean, first of all, because it undermines the sort of sense of universalism that we're supposed to have, enjoy the sort of tolerant nation that we're seeing develop. But also I think it just constantly preaches vulnerability when what we should really be upholding is assertiveness, the fact that all of us, no matter what the colour of our skin, can engage in society. So I think really it's not particular concerns about the state that's driving this. I think it's an attempt to claim a certain victimised status, and I think it's ultimately quite damaging.
Reni, borderline insulting, claiming victim status, your response?
Not at all, because I think if you actually look at the aims of the campaign, they're trying to highlight, using disruptive tactics, big problems that often we're not looking at. And I really think to say that Britain doesn't have a problem with racism is utterly disingenuous. You've only got to look at what happened after Brexit with that dramatic rise in racist hate crimes to show us that we've really got a long way to go. And our institutions can do better as well. So yeah, I think that unfortunately, it's annoying and frustrating for some people to have their traffic disrupted. But the point of protest is sometimes not actually to gain support. It's to create maximum disruption to raise awareness to an issue. And today people are talking about deaths in police custody in a way that they don't usually speak about it every day. And that's something that the campaign has achieved.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because if we hear so much about raising awareness about disruption, my question is, if this is really about the state, it's about the police, then why aren't people protesting outside Scotland Yard, outside of police stations? I think it really shows that that's not really what these protests are about. I think it's on behalf of a select group of pretty unrepresentative campaigners who are basically just trying to kind of peddle this vulnerable kind of identity politics kind of narrative. And I think that ultimately what it does, as we heard in the reference to this idea that Brexit has kind of led to this upsurge in racist attacks, really just shows that really what this is about pitting a group of people who are said to be really trodden upon, really vulnerable, against this kind of ignorant, most likely working class blob. And I think that ultimately that gets to grips with how damaging this sorts of protests are, because it's not really about freedom, it's not really about equality in any meaningful sense. It's just about effectively trying to score political points, and in the process undermining the two crucial things to any anti-racist universalist campaign, one of which that it's assertive, is about saying that everyone should play a role in society, that some people aren't weaker than others, constantly preaching vulnerability, only reaffirms that. And secondly, it undermines universalism, the goal that we're all supposed to be striving towards, and effectively says that people are different on the basis of their skin colour because you lot don't understand. There's the bigoted masses on one side and the oppressed minorities on the other. I don't think it reflects reality, and I think it's just an attempt to basically replay the political battles of the past rather than look at the problems that do confront us.
Okay, I mean, thanks for that, Tom. But, you know, to say that people haven't been protesting outside police stations is just not true. Almost exactly a year ago now, actually just over a year ago, a black man, Sheku Bayo, died in police custody after being restrained by 9 police officers. His family is still fighting for justice. This happened in Scotland, and there have been protests outside of police stations of people asking for accountability. Nobody's saying, oh, we're weak or we're vulnerable, blah, 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 boo-hoo, you treat us bad. People are saying, actually, there is an unequal treatment here, and we need to challenge that unequal treatment at the hands of institutions that should be treating people equally. So it's not imagined. Like, you've only got to look at the numbers to sort of see these vast disparities and be shocked. And I love that you preach about anti-racism. I think that's fantastic and great. And I would love to ask you your anti-racist credentials. When you see that black people are dying at a disproportionate amount in police custody, are you angry? Or are you angry at the people who are protesting against the fact that that happens?
Well, I think my point here is that I don't really think that's what motivates these protests in the first place. My point is that I think that ultimately, and I think it is reflected in the fact that people choose to blockade people going on holiday, it's basically all about this concept of raising awareness is basically just a byword for saying you lot are ignorant and we need to educate you. This is not really about fighting perceived individual issues. I mean, the anti-racist slogan of the 70s and 80s was black and white, unite and fight. Fight against the system, that was. Nowadays, it feels like so much more of the energy of so-called anti-racism campaigning is really just going into projecting an image of the masses as this kind of ignorant, white, working-class blob who are just somehow endemically racist. And that's why I think all of the energy is not going into protesting police stations. It's going into raising awareness, which is basically just a byword for saying you lot are ignorant, you lot are bigoted. And I find that ultimately damaging if what we're looking for is unity and universalism.
Reni, I just wanted to pick you up, Reni, if I can, on something you mentioned just a moment ago, that the point of protest is not always to gather support to your particular cause. But what, in essence, do you think those people who are, stuck on the M4 trying to get to Heathrow today, who haven't a racist bone in their body, will feel when they drive past and see a handful of protesters, not a body representative of the black population here in the United Kingdom, see them chaining themselves to each other for this? What do you think that those people who drive past and see them at the side of the road will think of them and, indeed, of the wider Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, so often when these sorts of things happen, people, shout things out of the window or they beat their horns in support. So I can't really tell you what they think. But I must say, I do question your sceptical sort of approach to the protests that are happening in the first place. And, I think if you want to find out why these people are protesting, they're putting the information out there for you on the internet, and I don't think it's fair to start, making up reasons as to why they're protesting. And they're making it clear they want accountability from state institutions that should be protecting us. Nobody should be dying at the hands of the police in this country in this age. We shouldn't even be having to have this conversation. And the question is, if you are upset and angry about the way that these people are doing their anti-racist activism, then propose a better solution. Show us your anti-racist credentials, and let's work together. Because nobody wants to be living in a world where racism persists. Nobody wants to. So if you're serious, and you're not just serious about, critiquing the ways that these people are going about doing it, but if you're serious in seeing the world, in seeing racism end and the world end racism, then pitch in your ideas. Let's do it together.
Tom, there is a point there that needs responding to, isn't it? Despite the bien-pensant circles in which we all move, the fact that our friends will not utter racist words of the like that a couple of generations ago would have been commonplace in the pub. Racism still exists in this country, and given that it does, don't we need to see outlandish tactics such as this to get it back onto the front pages, to get conversations like this one happening?
Well, I just find it staggering that we're still having these conversations where we're saying, of course, everyone in this room isn't racist, but there's some people out there who probably are. First of all, if they're out there and you don't run in those circles, how do you know? Second of all, I think it just speaks to the fact that this is just a presumed prejudice at this point. And if we're talking about setting things on the right path, my thing is that we've got to completely uphold universalism and reject victimhood. As far as I'm concerned, if there is a racialising dynamic in society today, it's this form of identity politics, which effectively says that on the basis of the colour of your skin, despite your lived experiences, despite how you might have been treated over your life, you are a victim, you are oppressed, and that these people over the other side are really hate you and are looking to thwart you in some kind of way. If there's anything that's making people tense around each other, if there's anything that's making people watch their words, it's that. Not because they're racist, but because this new kind of identity politics, supposedly anti-racist form of activism, is really just making people feel more nervous about each other by constantly playing out these battles of the past. If we're going to move forward, it's about reaffirming universalism, saying that ultimately we're all the same. And I think constantly, as I say, projecting this victim status, I think we're getting further away from that.
Tom Slater, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, Reni. Tom Slater, Reni, Eddo-Lodge, appreciate both of you joining us on Sky News this afternoon.
Thank you.